Hey everybody, welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. This is the place where I'm going to help you find the one thing that you feel is missing: healthy love. I am your host, Lauren Zoller, and in this podcast, I will share with you how to attract love, live in alignment, and elevate your deepest relationships. So buckle up, get present, tune into your body, and open up to the possibility that you truly do get to have it all. Let's dive in. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. We're going to talk about so much today, but your background is fascinating. I was reading your bio before we came on, and you and I have gotten to know each other a little bit because I was on your show a couple of months ago. But can you just take a moment to tell us your story? How did you go from being a professional athlete to now working in cybersecurity and coaching others on mindset? You really are multifaceted, and I would love to know, and I know everyone listening would love to know your story.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. I think we all have different milestones when we grow up and go through different processes and steps in our lives. I started out as a military-born kid, so played all kinds of sports, moved around the world, was exposed to all different types of cultures. And when you go through that environment, you're really trying to find yourself as a young person. And baseball became my identity. That's what my parents supported me as. That's what I knew myself as. That's what the community knew myself as. And I was able to get up to the professional level as a baseball player. And obviously that journey was very heavy from a lessons learned standpoint of how do you become a professional athlete? How do you have the skills where people recognize you, give you the praise you need to continue, and give you the chance and trust you? I talk a lot about trust because until I trusted myself, those scouts, the people that were recruiting me, weren't able to trust me. And I take that back to, my childhood as a, military-born kid. A lot of times your parents aren't really there, and you have to kind of build their trust so they can trust you to spread your wings and take care of your siblings and things of that nature. But after I got out of baseball, I had a huge identity crisis, which I talk a lot about today. And I really want everybody listening in today to walk away feeling more connected to themselves, because then you can go out and better connect with the world around you. And that journey for me was very messy, and I learned a lot of great lessons from that, and was able to get into a career in cybersecurity because I had that problem as a young business owner. I had a cyber attack, and we're always most qualified to serve that past version of ourselves. And cybersecurity to me is a topic that most people don't understand. And I always tried to put myself, whether I was in the locker room or in the community, into areas that people often misconstrued or misunderstood, to try to set the record straight for them. And that was something that always kind of brought my soul out. And I felt when people were confused about something, and that was kind of my superpower that I numbed when I was young, being able to feel the emotions and the feelings that other people had, and being able to ask them the right questions to get to the core of why they misunderstood it. And ever since I got out of baseball, I was able to find my new identity as Greg, and not as the baseball player or as the business owner. I've been able to find an interesting angle to cybersecurity, which often is looked at as technology focused, and more of the securing the connections that we value most. So it's not all about technology. It's about people. Sometimes it can be about things and material things. But a lot of times, I take that athletic experience and try to help people better connect with themselves first, because it's an inside out job, as I say. And that's really kind of where my journey's at today. But obviously a lot of ups and downs throughout that I'm happy to dive into.
Yeah, I think, hearing you talk about that, and I'm gonna go a little on a tangent here, because I feel like there's something really important in this that I would like to dive into, if you're okay being vulnerable about it. But I feel like so many people, at some point in their life, they lose their identity. Whether it's through, I had a brother who was a coach, a football coach, and he had a big moment in his life where he, transitioned out of the sports world and into owning his own business. It was a massive shift for him. But I know a lot of the women listening are finding their identity through a partner or finding their identity to their career. I know so many successful women who, myself included, had to go through a massive deconstruction to really get to the root of who they were as a human because their identity was placed in something outside of themselves. So I'm curious if you're okay. I know it's the messy part, but what did that look like when you had that reckoning in that moment of, wow, I don't know who I am. What was that like for you? And what did you do to crawl out of it?
Yeah, very scary at the time. I think back to my lowest moments of trying to figure that out, and you really feel like there's nobody around you that supports you because they don't really understand it, or they have forgotten when they went through that step in their process. And I think that's the most difficult thing for a lot of people, but definitely for me was I always had teammates, I always had coaches who were going through the struggle with me. And when I got out, I was, you're waking up on your own, you're going out into the world and trying to sell a vision of who you want to be. And you get a lot of resistance during that. And it's very scary. Obviously, fear comes up, a lot of uncertainty and confusion. And I think a lot of people are stuck in that stance today. I see it a lot with top level executives that I work with. I see it with a lot of the people that I mentor through my coaching programs. And that's why I talk a lot about a connected mindset, because to me, a connected mindset is what I needed when I was laying in bed and couldn't get out of bed and was like, I have nothing to live for. And that's a low moment. That's the depression. That's the downside that a lot of people don't talk about. But I went through that multiple times. It wasn't just one day and then I persevered and became this person I am today. It was messy. I call it the beautiful mess because it's, when I look back on it, I wouldn't be where I am today without those multiple low points. And when I try to ask people today the right questions so that if they're going through a low point, they feel safe and comfortable enough to share. And once you get people to share, that is where their breakthrough happens. And they may not realize it in that moment, but when somebody comes back to you 3 months, 6 months later and says, that one question you asked me that allowed me to connect to the thought I needed to push through made all the difference. And I think that's the moment that gives me shivers and is why I do what I do.
That's amazing. So what I'm hearing is that really it's finding that connection through being vulnerable with someone else and having someone there to hold space for you to ask those deeper questions. So I'm curious to know, when you say a connected mindset, where would someone start with that? Would it be, who does feel safe enough to go to so I can share and they can start asking these questions? Like, where did you go in that moment, and where can people start to shift into, okay, I really feel like I'm having an identity crisis. I don't know what to do. How do I start to shift out of this?
Yeah, it took me a while to open up to other people, to find that safe space. For me, it was a lot of self-discovery. It took me 6 months, a year, 2 years to go through a self-discovery process of how can I make the right choices that are going to set me up to live the future I knew I wanted to live. And a lot of times that's difficult because we start feeling sorry for ourselves. And I know I did. And I went to, numb it with different vices and things of that nature. And because that's what I saw around me. People were doing those things and normalizing numbing their emotions and not sharing them because they felt like people didn't really care. And I went through that process for a year, 2 years, 2.5 years. And it was a process I don't want anybody else to have to go through, of using vices to numb what they know exists. And for me, it all starts with the self-discovery piece. I had to set, what I call standards, but it's really, I had to set the framework of the Greg that I wanted to become, and then make the hard choices, to go on the run, or to make that hard phone call, or to reach out to somebody when I felt like they needed somebody to be there for them. So once I started to make those kind of small actions and take the harder route, I realized that I started to have some breakthroughs in my own self-discovery. So it took, a lot of people say, you have to serve others and then you get 2 times back. And as opposed to just serving yourself. But I think it all starts with a lot of the self-discovery of what do you really, what do you want to connect to? Mm-hmm. For me, it wasn't happiness, fulfillment, success. It wasn't, throwing a harder pitch. For me, it was clarity of mind and clarity of choices, and being able to have two choices and kind of feel my brain going to the easy choice, the kind of the choice that would make me feel like more at home. But I had to run away from home for a while in order to kind of self-discover. And then when I came back to that place of safety, I was able to have more clarity and realize that I have the choice to make the choice that's going to get me to that point of, obviously self-discovery doesn't stop. Mm-hmm. But for me, it wasn't another person. It was something I had to do within myself to unbecome that identity that I was so attached to, because obviously you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm used to going to play baseball today. So you start feeling depressed. I'm no longer playing baseball. I'm not that person. I don't have people patting me on the back for throwing the baseball, as hard as I can. So I had to do a lot of self-discovery, and I had to almost stop feeling sorry for myself as far as being able to make that hard choice and know that's what I needed to do to kind of plant the seeds that would later sprout and kind of push me on the path I'm on today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. When you were telling that story, it kind of sparked a story of, I always teach my clients that if you truly want to, the universe responds to your most predominant frequency, whatever that is. So if you want a new identity for yourself, you have to get really clear on what that identity is and understand you're not in that identity right now. So you've got to get really clear on the thoughts, beliefs, actions, and feelings that identity holds, and start to actually do those things. And sometimes it can feel like a fake it till you make it type of thing. I don't know if you resonate with that, if it felt like that when you started. But I think in hearing you talk about that, you're giving people hope to recognize that just because you're not where you want to be, if you start to claim what that new identity is for yourself, it's just a matter of waking up every day and saying, yeah, what would that version of me do? And the story that pinged for me is I had a mentor who was not an athlete, but he was in his late 30s, and he was like, you know what? I really want to be an athlete. Like, I want to embody what an athlete trains like and looks like and feels like. And so he did this very exercise. He said, okay, well, I'm going to be an athlete. What does an athlete think? What do they eat? How do they exercise? And so every day, part of his regimen would be that he would get up and he would put on like an insane amount of clothing. He lived in California and run up this hill that was behind his house. That was just a beast of a hill. And he kept doing it day after day after day. And he would do it with a mask on because he was like, I want to feel like I'm an athlete. And after about 6 months of doing this, he was running that same hill, and he got to the top of the hill and he took the mask off, and this guy passed by him and was like, dude, you are an athlete. What are you training for? Mm-hmm. And he said, I knew in that moment that my identity had shifted and I had become what I had been showing up for every single day. And I think, I don't know, your story just reminded me of that it's this, you've got to wake up and know you're not there yet, but you will get there. So if someone decides they're inspired by listening to this, and this is the Align Love podcast, most of the women that listen to this, they're looking to find and keep healthy partnership. And I always get, it's hard. Like, I'm never going to find a healthy partner, or I don't know how I'm going to fall in love with my husband again. There's this moment that you have to say, okay, what's the identity of that woman that has those things? And how can you continue to keep showing up for that, even though it's not in your reality? So how did you stay grounded in that in between? I call it the in between, between this is who I am, this is where I want to be. How did you keep showing up for that every day?
Yeah, I contribute a lot to being an athlete because you always have somebody you're looking up to. I say you have to have somebody you're looking up to, somebody you're chasing, which is yourself, 5-10 years from now. And then, somebody that's kind of helping guide and push you forward, which is one of those things, you kind of get pushed and pulled both ways. And I think that's the in-between, is you're being pulled toward this vision, but you want to enjoy the moment and you want to not repeat some of the things you've made mistakes in the past. and it becomes a stuck moment for a lot of people. And I can still feel those low moment days when I felt stuck. And I think for a lot of people, they just need to almost think about themselves in that position, or put themselves in the situation with that person, with those values, with those standards, and with those morals. And the body doesn't know any different when you think about having that vision and casting it, and thinking about yourself in that situation. I've done that with multiple businesses where I put myself in that office, or when I was a high school athlete, I put myself on the minor league field as a pitcher, and I thought about what I would do each and every day before the game, during the game, after the game, in order to be in that position as that athlete. And I do it in business today. I do it with a lot of my clients, is when you get to this position of being more connected and you're connecting with others, what do you need to do before? What do you need to do during? And what do you need to do after to be that person? Not necessarily become that person, but be that now. And obviously it's going to be messy, where you're going to make mistakes and you're not going to do everything perfectly. But if you just think about yourself in that stance, or with that person that you want to be with, and you almost, not law of attraction, but you almost start to become the person you need to become to attract that. Now, I know you talk about that a lot on this show, but for a lot of people, it takes self-discovery. For some people, it's you have to put yourself out there and be more, out in the community and things of that nature. You have to give yourself more options. But for me, when I think about ideal relationships, I think about two people that know their standards. So they've done that hard self-discovery work. They know how to communicate those standards. And then when somebody goes against the standards, they're willing to call them out and say, that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And here's why. Let's either have a discussion about it, or we go our separate ways. And I think it's, and we can talk about this later on in the show, but it's two people that have decided to be together when they know they can separate, because they're both on their own growth journey.
Right.
They both have their standards. They're both stern on them, but they've decided to make it happen, because they know those standards may change, which makes relationships very complex at the same time. But at the end of the day, those are the best relationships that I've been in and that I continue to be in, is the people that will call me out when they know I have a standard, or they know they have a standard, and I go against it. And that's really the best friendships, love relationships, any business relationship you have as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the important part is most people aren't clear on those standards. And that's where I think it gets really convoluted and messy, because most people are out there dating and even getting married and showing up in partnership, and they're placing, again, full circle, their identity back into the other person that they're in partnership with. And I've seen this happen, like you said, in business, in friendships. There's not this sense of self-discovery and really knowing who you are to be able to show up, because it's a partnership. It's two people showing up as whole individuals working towards a common goal. And most people forget that. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk a lot about building trust, because when I started my journey and kind of understanding what the connected mindset was to me, the through line, the thread of my whole career, from childhood through high school, through college, through professional sports, then business, and where I am today, is trust is the glue. And trust comes from the inside out. And a lot of people, they look to the outside to build trust with themselves, but you have to build it from the inside out. And a lot of times that's the hard work that many of us have to do. And when trust is broken, it's hard to rebuild it. And that's something I've seen in so many companies, where they've broken trust so many times with the people they do business with and the people internally, that they're almost numbed to what it looks like to have healthy relationship, healthy dynamics at play. And when I got into cybersecurity, I saw that with people's relationship with technology, with the people on their team. And I started to rethink, what is cybersecurity really? Because I had other people, and this is just like in relationships, you have other people tell you what a good relationship should look, feel, and appear like to the outside world. And we conform to that because it's the easy route. And when I started to challenge what that security was for people, not necessarily technology security, but that individual, that trust, the security we're all looking for, that safety, and where we feel like we are where we're meant to be. I realized that a lot of people were not trusting themselves based off of the questions that I asked. And that was painful for me because I could feel that they were doing things with a little bit of hesitation. And that to me was restricting their ability to live their best life, which was painful for me because I know I went through that and I know I'm still going through that.
Yeah.
So I thought, how can I solve that? And that's kind of how I came out with the connected mindset. Was if I was able to bring people onto a platform to talk about their stories, just like this show, and allow people to hear that other people are going through difficult times as well, and how they got through it and how they persevered. Obviously, there's going to be more difficult times coming. But if somebody picks up one nugget and leaves it, a little bit better off, then that's that kind of tingling moment of somebody coming back 3 months and saying that one thing that one person said helped push me through. And that's I think when I look back on my life, if I can do that multiple times over for multiple people, that's success and fulfillment.
For sure. Well, and you're leading people back home to trusting themselves. Even though you're in cybersecurity, I think what's really beautiful, and in essence, that's what we're all doing, right? That's what we do in this career. We led first because at some point there was some sort of a fire that led us down the journey of needing to find who we were internally and trust ourselves. And in essence, that's what you're doing, and that's what you're sharing with the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things about cybersecurity, when I got into it, and I was able to have just some incredible experiences because I was so early on in the industry and I was an athlete. So everybody's like, he's just the athlete guy. So I was able to have room to do crazy things. And it was one of the first presentations I was having. It was like a Fortune 50 company. And I started to ask them about their personal lives and, how they like to connect with their kids or their family members or things of that nature. And I linked that all back to what we were doing from the security side of things. And it was like a light bulb moment for them on, I didn't even think there was a people component to this. It's all, we think about it all as data and technology. And that's kind of what I became and becoming known for, is bringing more of that self-discovery, that people piece to such a technology-driven world, right. Which helps create less confusion. It helps create more clarity. It helps us weed in and weed out relationships that either serve us or don't serve us. And for a lot of people, they need a framework of how to know if a relationship is right for them or not. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that, you're basically just going off of feeling. And there's no purpose behind it. I think about the best relationships that I have. Obviously, when you first meet either a friend or a love relationship, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of emotion, there's a lot of feeling. And it's kind of, I think about it as a wave because I grew up near the beach, but eventually that wave comes down, and what carries the water on is the purpose of where it's headed. And every relationship has to have a purpose. And that's what I encourage executives to do today is, what is your purpose of securing your business or improving your culture? And if they have a defined purpose, they're able to go through any obstacle. But most of the time they don't. Even in these large companies, they're just doing it based off of what other people showed them is right, as opposed to challenging those. And I think that's where people that live with standards and really clear standards have challenged everything in their life that other people have told them. And then they've been able to kind of form their version of it, and kind of build that purpose that's going to get them through, and build those great relationships, both internally and externally. Yeah.
So important. It's really figuring out your why and making sure that that's really clear in anything that you do, which is super important. So I'm curious to know, because I know that people that are listening they're going to want to know how they can find you. So can you talk a little bit about where you are, what you've got coming up, how people can take advantage of what you have, and maybe even just talk a little bit about what you do and how you could serve people if they are to make their way into your orbit?
Yeah, absolutely. All over social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. I have my own show, The Connected Mindset Live, which you've been on. It was a great episode. Would definitely recommend you check it out. So I basically serve two specific people, organizations that want to have more trust internally and externally. And most organizations know that they have a lack of trust. that I serve, and they approach my team, myself, in order to help them rebuild or build it from scratch. And then people who are looking to break into this industry, I've been able to take that athlete mindset and some of the healing I've gone through and create a program for people that want to get into cybersecurity along this thought process of how I go out and serve organizations. And that's been very rewarding to take people who were in my position 5-10 years ago and allow them to break through a lot of the obstacles that I went through, both on the healing personal side, but also on the career side, because there has to be a balance. Obviously, they're integrated. If you're healing from the personal side, it's hard to bring a full person to the business side. So those are the kind of two specific people or organizations that I will serve today. One of the things, I help people do on an individual level, whichever one of those spheres they come in through, is how do they build better trust with themselves? And that's, for me, very important to accomplishing anything. I've seen that as an athlete. I've seen it as a business person. But I'm getting ready to release my second book, which is Cybersecurity for Everyday People. I'm getting to the end of what I call my cybersecurity phase, potentially, where I'm going to head a different direction. And I wanted to find a way to dump all that expertise and knowledge that I've been able to gain for the everyday person, not just for the organization or the big Fortune companies. It's really something that everybody, from the grandmother living in small town USA to somebody in a big city, really needs to understand for themselves. And then they can take that into the world around them, which makes us all a little bit more secure, a little bit more protected.
Love that. Love that. We will link all of that in the show notes. So for anybody that's listening, just make sure that you check out the show notes below and you can gain access to everything that you just spoke about. I ask one question every single podcast episode, and I'm going to ask you the same because I love hearing everyone's answers to it. And this will kind of round us out for today. But what does it mean to you to be in an aligned relationship? What does alignment in relationship, and it can be a romantic relationship, a relationship to self, a friendship, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a big question. It's one that I think about often because alignment for me, I relate back to my body alignment in order to be able to throw a pitch to a specific spot. For me, an aligned relationship is two or more people that know their individual standards, so know themselves, have taken the time to do the hard internal connection work, that self-discovery work. They bring that out to the world in a very clear way, and both people or the individuals involved decide that they want to be in that dynamic knowing those standards. So there's no guesswork of, does this person like to do this, or do they value this? You have that clarity that this is what they value, this is what I value. Those may be different values, but at the end of the day, you're choosing and you're aligning in a way that you choose to be with that person or those people continuously. And as long as those individuals are growing in their own direction, then come back and it's an optimal dynamic. I think that, to me, is optimal alignment. But it starts internally, and it's hard to be in an aligned relationship if you're not first aligned with yourself. And that's where I think world love comes together. If you think about any concept, when people believe and think something in the same way, they start to love each other. They start to spread love. They spread encouragement. And that, to me, is aligned love, aligned relationship, whether it's personal or from a love side.
I love it. And even just hearing you can have different values and you can still have the same shared goal inside of a partnership. That's really big. And I think everybody, with everything going on in the world right now, everybody needs to hear that. Greg, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was so wonderful. For anybody that's listening to the Align Love podcast, make sure that you rate this and share this with somebody who you think needs to hear it. Until next time, I will see you on the next episode of the Align Love podcast. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
That wraps up today's episode of the Aligned Love podcast. One thing that would really help me and the other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in and listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on Instagram at Lauren Zoller, and please share this podcast with anyone who you think may enjoy it. Until next episode, remember, every transformation begins with one moment of awareness, and I hope today has been yours. I'll see you next time.